Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. In today's video we'll be making a biker jacket. I've gone ahead and traced my front block. It's a full block this time, not a half. And we're going to begin at the shoulder line. I'm going to find the midpoint of my shoulder line. Make a mark there and draw that line to the hem, passing through the apex. And I'm going to duplicate that line on the other side of our front. And also on that shoulder line, I'm extending that line outwards by 1 inch. And I'm going to extend that shoulder line to that 1 inch and connect that 1 inch to the other side of our panel. This will become our roll line for when we draft the collar. Now at the center front, I'm going to extend that center front line to the other panel, and I'm going ahead to label my panel pieces. So I have my side front which will be cut 2 of main fabric and 2 of lining, and I also have my center front panel which will be cut 4, 2 of main fabric and 2 of facing fabric. Now we won't be using the other side of the panel. So at that shoulder line, I'm going out by 1/4 of an inch towards the shoulder, and I'm going to square a line from there upwards. And on that line, I'm going to place my back neckline measurement, which mine is about 3 inches and 3/4. And from that 3 inches, I'm going to mark outwards 1/2 inch. Then I'm going to find the midpoint of that back neckline, and I'm going to use a curved ruler to connect that midpoint to the 1/2 inch I marked. Then from that 1/2 inch, I'm going to square a line outwards. Here I'm just making sure that that line measures my back neckline. Then I'm going to square a line outwards, and on that line I'm going to measure 2 inches and 3/4. Now at that center front line, I'm going to mark a notch. That notch is very important, so please take note of it and mark it when you cut out your pattern. And from my front lapel, I'm just measuring up by 1 inch and then extending that center front, and on that line I marked 2 inches, and I'm going to connect that 2 inches to the 2 inches and 3/4 at the center back neckline. Once that's done, you can go ahead and trace out your neckline pattern for development. Sorry, your collar pattern. Now at the waistline of our pattern piece, I'm going down by 2 inches, and I'm going to connect that 2 inches to my panel pieces. So I'm connecting it at one panel piece and also at the waistline. Then I'm also going to extend the other panel piece downwards into the 2 inches. This will become a waistband. Here I wrote waist belt, but it's going to be the waistband. So I have the side front band and the center front band, which will be cut 4 each. Here I'm going ahead to trace out my collar piece for development. Make sure to mark your shoulder line and also your center front notch. Then I'm going to divide the back panel piece into 4, and then I'm going to slash to the edge of that pattern, and I'm going to spread it out by 3/8 of an inch. So here I'm slashing to the neckline corner of the peep of the collar, and I'm spreading by 3/8 of an inch. Now do the same thing for the rest of the panel pieces. Once that's done, you should have something like this. Then I'm going to extend the center back neckline and center back line, and on that line I'm going to measure 3.5 inches, 3.5 inches, and also square out my collar peak line. And from the center front notch there, I'm going to measure outwards 4 inches, and I'm going to connect the 3.5 to the 4 inches at the collar peak. Once that's done, go ahead and trace out your collar piece and add your seam allowances, remembering to mark your center notch, center front notch. That notch is very important. I went ahead and I also traced out my roll line into my collar piece. So here I'm just going to fold my pattern over and trace out that other panel of my pattern piece on the other side. This is not important, you don't have to do this, but I like to do this just so that I see how my collar is going, my lapel is going to sit when it's folded over. So this step is totally not important. Once that's done, I'm just going ahead to place my collar piece just so I'm sure I like the way everything will sit when the piece is complete. Now go ahead and trace out your panel piece. Mark your notches for your side and center front piece, because you'll be joining those two pieces together. So trace your side front, trace out your center front, and then also trace your belt piece, and remember to mark your notches and all your roll lines. Moving on to the back, I'm dividing the shoulder line into two like we did for the front, and I'm going to connect that line to the waistline, passing through the apex point at the back. So this, I'm just placing down 1/2 of my apex measurement. It will serve as my princess seam line. So I'm going to connect that to the waistline, and that's all for our back pattern piece. So here I'm going ahead to label my pattern pieces. I have my side back, which will be cut 2 of main fabric, cut 2 of lining. I have my center back, which will be cut on fold. So I'm cutting 1 of main fabric and 1 of lining. At the top of the back, I decided to add a back yoke, so I'm just using the across back line, which mine from the neckline measured at about 4 inches and 3/8. So I'm just putting a notch down there, and I'm going to label as my back yoke, which I'll be cutting 2 of on fold, 1 of facing and 1 of main fabric, and that's princess seam line will be cancelled because I don't need that. Now I want to take a portion of my front piece and add to the shoulder line of my back. So I'm measuring downwards from the shoulder 2 inches, and I'm going to draw a line there connecting to the neckline, and this will be our front yoke that will be connected, that will be joined to the back piece along the shoulder line, which will make that pattern piece one complete piece. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 patterns for the front and 3 for the back. Now I'm going ahead to extend my back waistline by 2 inches like I did for the front. I'm going to connect that line to the center back and also to the side. Now this back piece will be cut on fold. So I'm going to place my fold line at the center back, and I'm going to cut 1 piece of main garment and 1 piece of lining. I'm also going to join my center back band to my side front band, making it one complete piece. Once that's done, go ahead and trace out your pattern pieces. Add your seam allowances, remembering to mark your notches because it will be important to when it comes to joining the garments. So these are all my pattern pieces all cut out. I had my side front, my center front, my collar piece, my upper collar piece, and my under collar piece. I have my side back piece, my center back. Then I also have my back yoke, which is connected to the front yoke at the shoulder line. So I have that piece cut out and I've added my seam allowance. Then I have my center back band, which is connected to the side front band, making it one piece. And then I have my center front band as well, which will be cut 4. So I have an old sleeve pattern that I will be using. Here I'm just going ahead to make my welt pocket. So I measured 1 inch from that panel line and I'm slanting it down towards the side seam, and I'm marking my welt pocket is about 5 inches long, and then I just went ahead to make my markings and draw out my pocket piece. So my pocket piece will be cut 2 of main fabric and 2 of lining piece. Now one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of this video is this pattern piece is 2 sizes bigger than me, my normal size. So this is the fabric I'll be using. It's a cotton fabric, it's a cotton mix fabric. I don't really know what it is, but it has some kind of shine to it. So here I'm just placing my fabric with my grain lines parallel to the selvage of the fabric, and here I was trying to match my panel pieces, the plaid print on the fabric. So that's what you see me trying to do here. Now this is where matching plaid, it's always important that you mark your notches. That's why I kept emphasizing mark your notches, because these notches will help you know where to place the next pattern piece. So once you're done laying out your fabric, go ahead and cut out your pattern pieces and we can start sewing. So here I'm starting with the front, and I've cut a piece of fabric that is about 2.5 inches wide and about 7 inches long, and I've gone ahead and marked out my welt pocket on that piece, and I also did my welt pocket markings on the fabric on the side front piece of my fabric. So I'm going ahead to connect those dots together, pin those dots together. And I'm going to take that to my machine and sew along that lengthwise line, or sew along the long lines. And I'm going to cut my cut right in the middle of that stitch line, and I'm going to spread it open on the wrong side of the fabric, give it a good press, and then I'm going to place my zip at the back under the on the wrong side of the fabric, matching the zip head to the opening of the pocket piece, and I'm going to pin that down, take that to my machine and sew 1/4 of an inch away from the folded edge. Now because I didn't have a shorter zip, so I'm using a longer one. So I'm not going to sew over the zip teeth just because I don't want to break a needle. So I'm going to hand stitch that place down, but I suggest you use a shorter zip if you can get a hold of one. So now I'm placing my pocket facing bag to one side of my fabric, and I'm going to stitch along that edge, and I'm placing the lining piece also to the other side, right sides together, and I'm going to stitch on a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you're done, go ahead and serge your and finish your raw edges. Now place it in such a way that your facing piece is what's showing when the pocket is open. So once that's done, I'm going to pin along the pocket bag, take that to my machine and close the pocket bag, and then finish that stitch line. Once you're done, you should have something that looks like this on both sides of your side front pieces. Then we're going to go ahead and work on our center front pieces. So here I'm just attaching the center front waistband to the center front piece. I'm going to sew along my seam allowances and do a 1/4 of an inch top stitch away from the stitching edge. Now figure out which side you want your zipper to go. For me, my zip is on the left side of my jacket, so I'm placing one side of my zip on the center front left side of my jacket, and I'm going to stitch that down on 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Set that aside, and I'm going to take my center back piece and side back piece, join that together, and then join my side front piece also to my side back piece, making it one long piece so I can attach my waistband. Now taking my waistband, I'm going to pin it from the center back all the way to the side front. Take that to my machine and also sew that down. When you're done, it should look like this. Now we're going to attach our center front piece. Now I'm taking the piece that has the zipper already sewn to it, and I'm going to attach the other side of my zipper to the left side of my side front pattern. And I'm going to sew that down on a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once that's done, it should look like this. Now I'm going to turn that over and attach all my center front pieces the way it should go. Now I'm going to take my right side center front piece and attach it to my right side front piece, matching my notches and making sure all my seam allowances, my seam lines are matching, and I'm going to sew that down and repeat the same thing for my left side front piece. Once you're done, you should have something that looks like this. I'm doing a 1/4 of an inch top stitch on every piece on every panel that is sewn together. Just have that in mind. Now I'm taking my back yoke and I'm going to join it to my back pieces or my back piece, and once that's done, I'm going to join my front piece to my back piece along the shoulder line. Now I have something that looks like this. I've gone ahead and done a top stitch, and we're going to move on to working on the back, on the collar. Remember that notch that I told you to mark? Please remember to mark that center front notch. Now we're going to pin our collar along the neckline of our main garment. So we're pinning the under collar along the neckline of our main garment, and we're going to sew it and stop at that center front notch. If you need to clip into your neckline edge to fit your collar, please do so. Now we're going to set that aside and work on our sleeves. So I'm going to sew my sleeve down. But while I was cutting my sleeve, I made my sleeve 1 inch longer than the lining piece. This is so when I sew it in, I want a piece of that main garment to show inside the lining piece. So I've gone ahead and joined my sleeve pieces at the underarm, and I made a row of basting stitch at the top, gathering stitch at the top. And I have this I don't know what it's called, I'll write the name here. This piece that measures about 3 inches wide and 5 inches long. Then I also have my belt loops. It is 1 inch wide and I've made a bias tape out of it, and I'm going to fold that in half and sew along the open edge. Once I'm done sewing this piece along the seam allowances, I'm just going to iron that and sew 1/4 inch away from the edge, and then I'm going to take that piece, find the midpoint of that piece, and then I'm going to connect it to my shoulder line. Make sure you mark your shoulder line when you're cutting out your pattern. Then I'm going to join my sleeve to my main garment all around the armscye, and I'm going to take that to my machine and sew that down. Then I'm going to press my seam allowances towards my shoulder, and I'm going to top stitch that 1/4 inch away from the edge. Here I'm just going ahead to cut my belt loops, and I'm going to place one on the center back, one on the side front, on both side fronts, and at the front panel piece as well. Once you're done, it should look like this. Go ahead and repeat the same thing for your lining piece, joining all the pieces and leaving about 5 inch open at the side seam. Now we're going to go ahead and join our lining piece to our main garment. So I'm going to start with the lapel. So placing right sides together, I'm going to pin along the lapel piece or the overlay of the fabric of the jacket, and where we stopped stitching at the collar, I'm going to place a pin there and pass that pin through to the other side of the stitching line of the other collar. I'm going to pin that down and then pin along my center front neckline and also along my lapel piece. Then I'm going to take that to my machine and follow the already stitching line I made for the zip and stop stitching at where the stitching for the collar is. Do the same thing on both sides. And once you're done, you should have something that looks like this. It should look like a continuous stitch from the lapel piece to the collar line. Then we're going to join the collar piece. So I'm just taking my collar piece and I'm going to pin the upper collar to the under collar along the collar edge. So I'm pinning at my center back down to the front, to the peak of my collar, and then I'm going to stop stitching. I'm going to pull my seam allowances away from my collar to expose that stitching line, and I'm going to put a pin at that stitching line passing through the other side. I'm going to pin that down, and when I take that to my machine, I'm going to sew along the collar edge, making sure that my stitching stops exactly where that old stitching line is. I'm going to repeat the same thing for the other side as well. Then I'm going to pin along my hemline. So my waistband, I'm going to pin along that line, take that to my machine and also stitch at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once that's done, you should have something that look like this. So it should look like a continuous stitch on the collar. Now I'm going to go ahead and trim off the seam allowances at the collar edge and also at the lapel edge, and trim off the seam allowances at my pointed corners. Once I'm done trimming all of those seam allowances, I'm going to clip to all my notches, and then I'm going to turn my jacket piece inside out, right side facing front, and I'm going to give that neckline a press. Once you're done, you should have something that looks like this. We're almost done. All that's left to do is to finish the sleeve. So to finish the sleeve, I'm going to fold the main garment into the main garment on itself as wrong sides together, and I'm going to fold the lining also wrong sides together, pin that down, and I'm going to put my hand through that opening we left and catch those sleeve edges on the other side, which is the main fabric and the lining piece. So when I pull that out, automatically I have right sides facing each other. So I'm going to pin along the sleeve hem, take that to my machine and sew that down, and do the same thing for the other side. If you need to, please slow down this video so you can understand what I'm really doing. And once you're done, your jacket is almost complete. You have your sleeve completely finished, and you have the inside of your garment looking all nice and clean. I went ahead and I top stitched along all the corner edges of my jacket, so along the waistband, along the center front, and along the collar. Now all that's left to do is to hand stitch that 5-inch opening on the lining closed. So here I cut out a belt piece that is about 22 inches long and 4 and 5 inches wide, and I'm going to fold that in half, and I'm going to sew down the open edge. Once that's done, I'm going to trim off my seam allowances and pull that out, and I'm going to do a top stitch 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of that belt all rounded. And at my shoulder, I don't know what it's called, I write the name, I just used a button to join that down, to hold that down in place. Once you're done, this is what the jacket looks like. I hope you all enjoyed this video and you learned something from it. If you like this video, please leave me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Also, if you have any video suggestions, please leave them down in the comment section and I will try my best to do that. Also, this jacket can be worn with a skirt, shorts, jeans, whatever you desire. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.